I don't know if I'll ever be able to explain this properly. Maybe it doesn't even need an explanation. Some people build theories, searching for meaning in the middle of chaos. God knows I tried. My family has always been insultingly ordinary. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Quite the opposite. That absence of problems gave us a quiet life. We weren't rich, but we never lacked anything. We never took luxury vacations, but we could afford to visit relatives once a year. My parents had a happy marriage. There wasn't much to complain about. For the longest time, I thought we all lived the same simple life. But at the start of 2014, I realized I was wrong. And that's where this story begins. It all started, strangely enough, with a photography workshop. We were told to pick a family member, take their portrait, and capture the essence of their personality. I chose my grandfather. At first, it seemed like a boring choice. My grandparents were as calm as the rest of us. But their house was different. Over 150 years old, it was a character on its own. Old, heavy, and quiet. Almost like a convent or an antique hotel. That Saturday, I went over and started taking pictures of my grandfather. Later, we sat down to eat. My grandmother, sweet as always, had made chicken soup. Ever since I was a kid, I had once told her it was my favorite dish. From that day on, every time she knew I was coming, she prepared it just for me. That was the kind of woman she was, gentle, thoughtful. We were halfway through lunch when a commotion broke out in the street. A young man had tried to rob the house of an old man who lived near the corner. But the thief hadn't counted on all of the man's sons being home that day. They caught him and dragged him into the street, beating him mercilessly right in front of my grandparents' house. My grandfather, a sensible man, walked outside and begged them to wait for the police. He always said you never truly knew if someone stole out of greed or desperation. I wanted to run out and see, but my grandmother stopped me. She asked me to stay inside. So I did, listening to the shouting echo through the heavy wooden doors of that ancient house. The place was a labyrinth. From the main entrance, one hallway led left toward the bedrooms, another right toward the kitchen and living room. At the center, a door opened onto a small courtyard with a fountain, an angel carved in stone. That angel had always frightened me. Since childhood, I couldn't look at it without feeling uneasy. Trying to ignore the noise outside, I decided to continue my assignment. I pointed my camera toward the angel, adjusting for the perfect light. Suddenly, through the lens, I thought I saw someone walking into the bedroom wing. I lowered the camera. No one. That part of the house was usually closed to visitors. For some reason, my grandparents slept in separate rooms, doors facing each other at the end of the hallway. Between them, another door, one I had never entered before. I'd only overheard whispers that it was a storage room, full of old photographs and belongings left behind by generations of our family. Curiosity got the better of me. As I reached the door, I felt something strange, like two forces pulling me in opposite directions. As if someone was calling me closer, while at the same time pushing me away with invisible hands. Then I heard it. Ernesto. My name. I froze. My blood turned cold. And then, hands grabbed my shoulders. I screamed. It was my grandmother. I had never seen her so angry. She scolded me harshly, something she had never done before. She swore me to silence, told me not to mention it to my grandfather, and, to my shock, even asked me to leave the house immediately. From that day on, she never made chicken soup for me again. It hurt more than I expected. By the end of that same year, she passed away, on December 23rd, without forgiving me, without ever explaining what I had done to upset her so deeply. On Christmas Eve, while the whole neighborhood celebrated, my family was gathered at the funeral home instead. My cousins and I, especially those of us in high school, shared memories of our grandmother. Eventually, I confessed my secret, that last conflict with her, how my innocent curiosity had ruined the final months we had together. Everyone agreed it wasn't such a big deal. And then, Sarah spoke. She was only 12 at the time. We thought she had been asleep, resting against her brother's lap. But without opening her eyes, she said something that made my blood run colder than ever. She claimed she had once seen the inside of that forbidden room. According to her, it was completely covered in religious images. And in the center of the room was a round table, filled with candles, lit and burning. We didn't believe her. Our grandparents were never religious. They hadn't raised their children in the Catholic or Protestant faith of their own upbringing. We told her she must have imagined it. But Sarah's voice was steady, dreamlike. If you don't believe me, she whispered, Go see for yourselves. The house is empty now. We were only 5 or 6 blocks away. The idea was insane, but we couldn't resist. We told our parents we needed to pick up something from the house, asked my grandfather if he needed anything. He only shook his head, staring motionless at my grandmother's coffin. And so we went. The street was darker than usual, deserted, almost unnaturally quiet. Inside the house, silence was so complete we could hear the faint buzzing of the light bulbs. We walked down the hallway, past the angel in the courtyard. For the first time, I felt its gaze fixed on me. Its mouth, in the dim light, seemed open, not in a smile, but in a scream. And then we stood before the door. Christian, Giovanni, Alex, and me. We opened it. And what we found inside was exactly as Sarah had described. The walls, from floor to ceiling, were covered with images, Catholic saints, Hindu figures, religious icons from every corner of the world. In the middle stood the round wooden table, sky blue, ugly, worn, and on it, dozens of candles, lit, flickering, burning, 33 in total, arranged in a precise pattern that could not be accidental. That night, staring at those flames, I realized something. My grandmother's anger had not been about curiosity. She had been guarding a secret older than her, older than my grandfather, older than any of us. And it was still burning. That night, standing in front of that glowing table, we whispered and argued in disbelief. The air felt heavy, the smell of wax and smoke thick. My cousins circled the room, pointing out the strange icons, the endless faces staring at us from the walls. But my eyes were fixed on one candle. It was about to die out. Before I could warn the others, we heard the front gate slam. Someone had entered the house. I ran to the hallway. From there, I could see the patio. It was my grandfather. Panic set in. We scrambled in silence, desperate not to be caught. 2 cousins darted into his bedroom. I slipped into my grandmother's room, shutting the door as gently as possible. My heart pounded as I slid under her bed, praying he wouldn't hear me. The slow, deliberate footsteps of my grandfather came closer. Stopped, right outside the door. I held my breath. The door creaked open. I expected fury, a shout, a hand pulling me out from under the bed. Instead, I saw his feet move toward the center of the room. He knelt, reached under the bed. His hand brushed past my face. For a moment, I thought he had found me. But no, he pulled out an old shoebox and left. I waited until the footsteps faded. Only then did I crawl out, shaken, and rejoin Alex. He looked pale. He had hidden under the table of candles. He whispered to me. Grandpa came in. He lit a new candle, the one that was about to go out. He replaced it. We counted them. 33 candles. Exactly. That number mattered. We didn't know why, but it mattered. Months passed. In August 2015, my grandfather's health suddenly failed. He was hospitalized. Days later, he was gone. Before he died, though, he asked for Alex, the most rebellious of us, the one who had come out as gay at 14. Some relatives rejected him, but our grandparents had been the ones to embrace him fully. Perhaps that was why my grandfather chose him for his last words. Alex told me later, with tears in his eyes, what my grandfather had said. I saw you, that night, hiding under the table. Alex froze, realizing he had been discovered all along. It wasn't your fault. Not yours. Not your grandmother's. But you must keep them lit. Always. All 33. Promise me. Those were his last words. The night he died, Alex begged me to go with him back to the house. When we entered, the air inside felt darker than outside, even though it was still early evening. We rushed to the forbidden room. Several candles were nearly consumed. One had already gone out. We found the shoebox my grandfather had taken from my grandmother's room. It was filled with replacement candles. We lit the missing one, restored the number to 33. The instant the flame caught, a deep sound shuddered through the room. Like a long sigh, not human, not natural. I wanted to believe it was the wind, but deep down I knew better. That was the beginning of the worst week of my life. Alex insisted we couldn't leave the house unattended. Someone had to keep the candles burning. I agreed to stay with him. The rest of the family thought we were just guarding the property after the funeral. Only our Uncle Manuel seemed suspicious. That night, he arrived with food and announced he'd sleep in my grandmother's room. He acted kind, even cheerful, but his presence meant we couldn't investigate further. We sat in the living room, talking quietly, when the hallway clock struck midnight. And then, Behind its chime came another sound. A thud, like someone falling from a bed. Alex looked at me. He had heard it too. Uncle Manuel didn't react. Moments later, Alex leaned close and whispered, "I replaced some candles, but I left the extras in Grandma's room. We should bring them here. They're burning faster than they should." When our uncle finally went to bed, Alex and I lay awake on the couches, staring into the corners of the room, unable to sleep. That was when we heard it. Running. Something darting across the central patio, knocking over flower pots. The window rattled. A shadow leapt inside. At first, I told myself I was dreaming. But then I saw Alex, wide-eyed, pointing silently toward the hallway. And there it was. The silhouette of the angel statue. Except it was standing in the hallway, looking straight at us. That same carved smile. Alive in the dark. Alex screamed and bolted. The figure vanished down the corridor, footsteps echoing across the bedrooms, straight toward the door of my grandmother's room. Uncle Manuel burst out, pale and trembling. Someone just went into her room. We all froze, listening. The silence was unbearable. Then, without warning, the door slammed violently from the inside, nearly knocking Alex backward. Uncle Manuel panicked, ran to the kitchen, shouting for a knife. Alex took the chance to rush into the candle room. One was out. He lit a new one. 33 again. The moment the flame caught, I heard it. Laughter. From inside my grandfather's room. It was Tuesday evening when I returned with a suitcase. Alex had already settled in that morning. Our uncles didn't seem to mind us staying there. They thought we were being respectful, watching over the house. But Uncle Manuel had other ideas. The very first night, he showed up at dinner, carrying food, and casually moved into my grandmother's old room, as if he had every right. That made it harder for us. With him so close, we couldn't openly talk about what we'd seen. Still, the house itself wasn't going to stay quiet. At midnight, the hallway clock rang. Beneath its chime, a heavy thud shook the floorboards, like someone had fallen from a bed. I stared at Alex. He had heard it too. But Uncle Manuel? He pretended nothing had happened. Later, Alex whispered that he had stored some replacement candles in Grandma's room. "They're burning faster than normal," he said. "We'll have to bring them back." We tried to sleep in the living room, but I couldn't. I kept staring into the corners, into the thick shadows the house always seemed to hoard. Just when I started drifting off, a sound jolted me awake. Running. Something sprinting across the patio. Pots shattering. The window rattled, as though something had leapt inside. Alex was awake too. He gestured wildly toward the hallway. And I saw it. The angel. Not the statue, its silhouette. Standing there, smiling. I froze, my chest tight. Alex, braver than me, screamed and charged toward it. The figure fled, footsteps pounding through the corridor, disappearing into Grandma's room, where Uncle Manuel was sleeping. He stumbled out seconds later, pale and horrified. "Someone just broke in. Someone's in there." Before we could answer, the bedroom door slammed violently from the inside, nearly knocking Alex down. Uncle Manuel panicked, running for the kitchen, shouting he was getting a knife. Alex rushed instead into the candle room. One flame had died. He lit another. The instant it flared up, I heard laughter. Not human laughter, rasping, sharp, and cut short, like someone choking. The following days blurred into a nightmare. Strange noises at night. Shadows moving through the corridors. Every time a candle weakened, something stirred in the house. One evening, Uncle Manuel decided to test it himself. He walked into the candle room, picked one up, and blew it out. The entire house shuddered. The lights flickered. The flames trembled as if something invisible had just exhaled across them. Then came the footsteps. Above us. On the roof. Heavy, deliberate steps that shook the walls. Uncle Manuel relit the candle, his hands trembling. The steps stopped instantly. "They don't want the candles blown out," he whispered. "Whatever they are, they get angry when we do." The next night, Alex and I were in the kitchen when we heard it again, a sigh. Long and deep, seeping from the candle room. Then came a whisper. At first it sounded like water running through pipes. But as we leaned closer, it grew louder. Words. A language I didn't know. A voice that shouldn't have been there. I bent down, pressed my ear to the old iron pipes, and for a split second, I swear, I saw an eye staring back at me. I stumbled back, heart racing. Then the kitchen lights went out. The only glow left was from the hallway, where one candle had just died. I ran toward it, but as I turned the corner, I saw her. A woman, dressed in a wedding gown. She ran straight at me. I bolted, veering toward the front door instead. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for breath in the freezing night air. Across the street, I saw Patricia, our neighbor. I ran to her door and knocked. She answered, confused but kind. I told her I needed to make a phone call, that my cell had died. She let me in. But as she handed me her phone, I saw something through her window. My grandmother's sewing room. Her silhouette, sitting at the machine. Clear as day. Patricia saw it too. She froze, whispering, "Isn't that your grandmother?" The figure turned toward us. And in that same moment, Alex and Christian came running from the house, shouting. When I looked back, the silhouette was no longer sewing. It was standing, dressed in a wedding gown, just like the figure I had seen in the hallway. That night, none of us went back into the house. The following morning, neighbors admitted they had seen things for years. Shapes in the windows, movements at night. Some swore they had seen my grandmother's figure, even after her death. One said it didn't feel threatening, that she seemed to be watching over us. But to me, it was worse. Because if she was still there, it meant she hadn't been able to leave. She was trapped. By the candles. By the house. By whatever else lived inside it. In the days that followed, Alex and I felt the weight of the house closing in. The family kept their distance, leaving us to watch over the place, but they had no idea what was really happening. Finally, Alex told me he had spoken with the son of Don Fidel, the handyman who had always taken care of the old house. His father, too sick to work, had refused to speak. But the son, after seeing Alex's desperation, gave in. And the truth was worse than anything we had imagined. Years ago, during a routine repair, Don Fidel and his crew had been asked to fix a pipe in the back room, the very one that later became the candle room. To do so, they had to break through the floor. A meter down, they struck something solid. A small chest. The grandparents were called in. Excited, they carried the chest inside. It wasn't the first time something had been found on the property. Houses that old, from the times of the Revolution, sometimes hid treasures buried for safekeeping. But when they dug deeper, they found more. Another chest, and bundles wrapped in cloth. Don Fidel asked his helpers to leave, but his son, just a curious boy back then, hid and peeked through the doorway. He watched as my grandparents began unwrapping the bundles. At first, he thought they were old artifacts. Then he saw their faces change, from curiosity to horror to disgust. Inside the cloth were things no one should have seen. Hands. Human hands. And in one of the chests, something small. Fragile. Shaped like an infant. The boy said my grandmother screamed so loudly it shook the whole house. She ran to the kitchen to call someone, though he never knew who. My grandfather stayed inside, repeating over and over, "It can't be. It can't be." Later that night, men arrived. Friends of my grandfather, by the way they spoke. They carried everything out of the house. But whatever they had uncovered, it was too late. Something had already been awakened. From that day forward, the house changed. And Don Fidel himself changed too. He grew ill, weak, plagued by nightmares. His son said he heard him muttering in his sleep, words half-formed and horrifying. They were real hands. A baby's body. Fragments of memories he couldn't erase. The boy admitted he never understood exactly what it all meant. But he was certain of one thing. Whatever your grandparents found that day, they didn't bury it. They didn't burn it. They tried to contain it. That's what those candles are. Containment. When Alex told me this, he was pale, his eyes glassy. "Ernesto," he whispered, "this isn't just about us. It's about our family. About our bloodline." He told me he had also learned something else. Dark stories about our ancestors. Occult practices during the Revolution. Secrets never spoken to their children, let alone to us. One story in particular froze me. During the chaos of the early 1900s, a cruel landowner had taken refuge in this very house, leaving his little daughter in the care of our family. But when violence swept the city, the family fled, without her. When they returned nearly a year later, they found her body. She hadn't been dead for a year. She had only died recently, which meant she had survived in the house, alone, in the dark, for months. Starving, screaming, until she couldn't anymore. And she wasn't the only one. There were other stories, relatives locked away for madness, for shame, for secrecy. Lives erased, hidden behind the walls of that house. It was no ordinary home. It was a tomb of tragedies. And all of them, somehow, connected to the room with 33 candles. The next day, Uncle Manuel returned with a priest. Not just one, but two. They listened to our story without laughing, without doubting. That, in itself, was unsettling. One of them admitted that my grandmother had once come to him, years ago, asking for help. He had blessed the house, sprinkled holy water, but it hadn't worked. Eventually, she had turned to other beliefs, desperate for peace. They walked through each room, praying, blessing the walls. But the older priest shook his head. This was tried before, he said softly. And it didn't work then, either. Before leaving, they warned us. Whatever lives in that room, it was awakened. It will not rest with prayers alone. That evening, Uncle Manuel revealed his plan. He had brought in a woman, a spiritualist, no older than 30, short with cropped hair. She carried a wooden board. At first glance it looked like a Ouija, but not quite. It's not for asking questions, she explained. It's for guiding spirits, helping them move on. I didn't believe her. Not at all. But Alex clung to the hope. At midnight, she set up in the candle room. The air thickened with incense and the rancid smell of strange wax. Religious figures from every faith stared down at us from the walls. This will take time, she said. One candle for every presence. But know this, these are not ordinary candles. They burn with living flesh. When they go out, whatever they contain will vanish. Forever. Her words made my skin crawl. Living flesh. What did she mean by that? And then, the experiment began. Uncle Manuel was asked to take one candle, carry it to the entrance hall, and blow it out. The moment he did, his reflection in the mirror blurred, faded, until it was nothing but a dark smear. Then, out of that smear, a woman in black reached toward him. He screamed and ran outside. I was next. I carried a candle into the hallway. I hadn't even blown it out before something, cold, invisible, snuffed it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the angel statue move, its head lowering, watching me. When I dared to glance back, I saw another figure. My grandmother. Or at least something wearing her shape. The ritual went on deep into the night. The air was thick with smoke and incense, the smell of melting wax so foul it burned my throat. The spiritualist whispered in Latin, chanted in strange tones, lighting her own candles. Thick, heavy ones she called living wax. She claimed each flame would bind one presence, keep it from returning once extinguished. But the house didn't want peace. It wanted us afraid. I remember Alex walking in with a heavy candle, one from the center of the table, larger than the rest. His hands trembled as he carried it, his face lit eerily by its flame. And then everything collapsed. The woman's candle slipped and shattered. In that instant, a noise thundered through the house. Heavy footsteps, too heavy for a man. A presence entered the room, its shadow cast by the flickering flames. It was enormous, horned, like a goat standing upright. A growl shook the walls. And then, with a rush of wind, every single candle went out. Darkness swallowed us. What I heard next, I'll never forget. A roar, but not from outside, not from the room. From inside my head, like the sound of 1,000 voices screaming through stone. The hallway filled with moving shapes, blurry silhouettes that walked toward us, unsteady, unfocused, like people out of a dream. I struck a match, my hands trembling, and lit a candle. For a heartbeat, one of those figures was clear. It looked human, almost, but its face was wrong. Out of focus, melting. The door slammed. We lit every candle we could find, not just 33, but every scrap of wax in the room. 18 of the spiritualist's candles caught fire. The rest would not. When it was over, she shook her head. I can't help you, she whispered. Don't ever call me here again. She left. And the younger priest who had promised to wait outside? He was gone too. Vanished. The house was never the same. Uncle Manuel inherited it. He wasted no time, leasing it to a government office. But the tenants didn't last. Complaints, strange accidents. Within months, it was empty again. When Alex finally told the rest of the family what had happened, Manuel called him a liar. Worse, he painted him as unstable. And soon after, doctors began diagnosing Alex. Depression, bipolar disorder, then schizophrenia. But I know the truth. I was there. I saw it all. Even now, years later, the house still stands. Silent. Shuttered. Neighbors cross the street rather than walk past its gate. Sometimes, at night, They say they still see the glow of candles in the windows. 33 flames. Burning. Waiting. And I know better than to go back. Because if even one of those flames dies, so does the silence. Fire the end.